This video is about building a classic, traditional 1950s river drift boat and where to get the plans to build a small model like this or a full-size one in your garage. This is my model, 1 inch to the foot scale. It's a rare kit and I bought it on eBay. It may or may not be available as a kit. I will leave links in the description. Figures on the boat did not come with the kit, and I'll show you in the video how those are done. The stand was something I created, and I'll show you how that was done. The fishing fly rod was something I created with music wire, plastic, and brass wire. The flannel shirt on the woman was printed on an inkjet printer. The anchor on the back was something that I added. The kit came with all the wood and the plans. Since the kit may no longer be available, you'll need the book. There's a book that has all the directions and plans that you need to build a full-size, traditional, a river drift boat in your garage or a small-scale model. The book is called Drift, Boats River Dories, written by Roger L. Fletcher. It's a great book. It covers the history about the development of the drift boats from the beginning, how they were developed. I thoroughly enjoyed all the history and the details about building the boats. There's also plans on how to build a full-scale drift boat in your garage. There's also a section on how to build a model like the one I built. There's complete instructions and photos and a step-by-step directions on how to do the boat as a model. And there's drawings and plans that you can use to create your pieces for your model. And there's several models of drift boats in the book, so you can build several models if you'd like. Links for the book are in the description. I'm going to be covering the model that I built, which is the double ender with a transom on one end. I'm not going to show you how to build the actual boat kit or from the book. You'll need to get the book and follow that. What I will be covering are the extras that I added to the model. Creating the drift boat figures. The figures are created from mannequins I purchased on eBay. Make sure you get the kits that have many hand positions. I first finish building the model, then I add the figures to the boat, and I pose them in their positions. I use super glue on the joints in order to lock them in that pose. I use medium super glue because it's thick and it fills the gap and it doesn't run like the thin glue. I use this kind of epoxy clay to fill the gaps on the mannequins. Epoxy clay is easy to use. You simply mix 2 equal parts of epoxy clay together, mix it well. The clay will stay soft for about 30 to 40 minutes, allowing you plenty of time to do the work you need to do. You can add other features like hair, eyebrows, and boots. I let it harden overnight, and in the morning it's nice and hard and it's easy to sand. Once you have the figure done, you can give it a coat of paint before adding the material. I create the clothing on the figures, taking fabric, cutting it in patterns, and wrapping it around the figures and gluing it with super glue. I first start with the arms, work on the front and the back. I cut out pieces for collars and pockets and add those to the shirt. The next step on the woman's clothing was to do the pants. I cut large pieces and kept wrapping it around her legs, putting the seams inside where it wouldn't be seen, cut pockets, cut belt loops. When you finish the pants, you paint them blue with acrylic paint. The boots and belt were painted brown and added to the figure. The figure of the woman has a plaid shirt. I could not find material small enough, so I printed it on my inkjet printer. There's how-to videos on YouTube on how to print on fabric. The steps for doing the man figure are the same as for the woman. I needed to create a hat, so in order to do that I used some thick paper and I added clay to the top of the head in order to fashion the hat. I added clothing just like the woman, wrapped it, used super glue to fasten it, painted it using acrylic paint, and then I created the belts, the belt loops, waders for the fishing guide. Creating the fly rod. I had to do some research for the fly rod, positioning it as if she was casting it in the river. Her hands had to be in the right position, and how she handled the fishing line had to be correct. I created the fishing rod by using music wire and bending it into the shape I needed. I created a reel for the fly rod using polystyrene, cutting it to shape, and drilling holes. In order to create guides on the rod, I used small flexible wire and small pieces of tape. For the handle, I used some plastic tubing. I glued the rod together with superglue and painted it with acrylic paint. The fishing line is made out of very thin brass wire, and it bends very easily. On the end of the fishing line, I glued some fabric in order to create the fly. I was able to make it look like it was flying through the air. I positioned the rod in her hand and threaded the brass fishing line through her hand. Once I had the position, I used a dab of superglue. Adding an anchor to the boat. The model did not come with an anchor. The anchor on this kind of a boat is just basically a weight that holds it against the current. I created the anchor by using a fishing weight and reshaping it with epoxy clay. The anchor works by a pulley system. There's a rope that's tied to the cleat between the legs of the guide. The rope runs underneath the floorboards, up through the transom, and out the back of the boat. There's a wooden arm on the back, but the rope comes out and holds the anchor. The guide unties the rope from the cleat, allows the anchor to drop, and when the anchor line is set, he ties it back off on the cleat. The pulleys were made out of brass rods and polystyrene. Designing the boat display stand. I wanted to create a display stand to hold the boat that represented a stream that you could see through the water to the rocks below, and a gentle wave action on the top of the water. And from the side of the display, you could see the bottom, the water level, and how the boat sat in the water. This type of boat has a shallow draft, so it sits high in the water, skimming over the rocks. The design of the boat makes it easy for somebody with oars to handle. Making the water level pattern. I took a stand, the size that I was going to use, and some poster board. I used the display stand to draw the oval, and I used the bottom of the boat to draw the pattern for where it would sit in the water. And then I cut out the inside where the boat would sit. And I cut out the oval. I checked the pattern to make sure the boat would fit in the pattern, and I set it up on a practice stand to see how the boat would sit at the height that I wanted it. I purchased this thin plastic, and I used the pattern to cut the plastic to match my design pattern. I sanded the outside of the oval to get rid of any rough places. I used some spare plastic rods I had gotten with the mannequins. I drilled holes in the bottom of the stand. I put the pegs in the holes, lined it up with my display, and I superglued the legs to this plastic stand. In order to create a wave action on top of the water, I used acrylic medium. I used a plastic bottle I purchased at the drugstore, and I used one of my flex tips at the top in order to make a dispenser. I used the dispenser to put wave action on the top of the plastic. This medium is fairly thick and it won't run. You can see the liquid when it goes down, but when it dries, it's clear. The next step was to paint the water. I painted on the opposite side of the display so that the brush strokes would not show. In order to make sure the paint was transparent, I used liquid medium with the paint. Once that was painted, I put dowels into the holes to preserve the holes for the plastic stand. Once the dowels were in place and the masking tape was protecting the edge of the display, I added a layer of modeling paste. Then I added real rocks from the garden center and small rocks from the aquarium store. Once those had dried overnight, I added a coat of gesso paint to make everything the same color and pattern. I used acrylic paint to paint the rocks and the river bottom to the color that I needed. Assembling the boat on the display. Okay, so this is how the display goes together. You have the holes that have been preserved with the pegs when it was constructed. Simply take the stand and you put the pegs. You take it, line it up with the holes, push it down, make sure it's secure at the water level. Then to take a boat model, and you find the spot that it goes into. And then you add the woman. She has a little peg in the bottom of her foot to help line it up with the hole in the deck. So she just fits in that little spot where the legs go. And then you make sure that her foot is in there. And then you add the man. The oars are not glued to his hands. They're just inserted into the hands. And he just sits right on that seat. And then you just put the oars right in the oar locks. And you can adjust your boat a little more if you need to. And that's how it's done. I hope you've enjoyed this video and have been inspired to do your own boat. Good luck and happy modeling. If you're a model builder, check out my 3D collection on iMaterialize.com. Links in the description.